Go ahead and call the school board meeting into session at this time. And Mr. McInnes, would you speak for a moment about the telephone sitting in
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Bryant's place?
Mr. Bryant is traveling on school board approved business tonight and has requested to appear and participate in the phone meeting by phone, which your policy allows, but it does require the board to make a motion to authorize him to appear by phone.
Need a
So
motion?
moved.
Motion by Mr. Destin.
A second.
Second by Dr. Kell. Any discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. All in favor? Motion carries. Mr. Bryant, how'd you vote?
I did.
Okay. So the motion carries 5-0. And that's going to be something we're going to have to help me remember
Yes, sir.
to ask
he
Mr.
votes.
Bryant what his vote is. Okay? All right, so let's go ahead and move through the agenda as we normally do. The first item of business, actually, will be the approval of the agenda. And I do have a change here. Let me read this out. Consent agenda, correction to item 8.5, appropriation of District 3 School Board member capital outlay funds to Florosa Elementary School for electronic message center should be in the amount of $13,485. Discussion agenda, item 10.1, request for school board direction regarding the 2020 sales tax program was deleted. All right? So those are the changes to the agenda, and so, colleagues, I'm looking for a motion.
I'll move we approve the agenda as amended.
I'll second it.
All right, motion by Mr. Destin, second by Ms. Ivanchek. Any discussion? All right, let's vote. All in favor? Mr. Bryant, how say you?
Aye.
Okay, so the motion carries 5-0. That one went okay. All right, Section 3, recognitions, we have none. Section 4, visitors, we have none. Section 5, administrative personnel appointments, we have none. Moving on to Section 6, public comment, we have some. In fact, I think we have 7 or 8 here. And so what I'll do is I'll call folks up on public comment as the cards were given to me in the order they were given to me. And I know you had a chance to look on the back of the card and you understand what the guidelines are. And each person will have 4 minutes, and Dr. Kelly will be keeping time. And it may be that board members might have questions, or they may not. And if you have any questions for the board, please direct your questions to me, and we may or may not answer. It just depends. We might not know the answer. All right, so in this case, I'll call forward Ms. Diana Gilbert. Ms. Gilbert from Niceville, Florida. Welcome, Ms. Gilbert.
Thank you. Diana Gilbert from Niceville, Florida. I continue to support the election of our school superintendent. Our students and schools are very important, so having a voice as to who is our superintendent is also very important. An election shows the approval of we the people rather than 3 to 5 school board members. It also gives the citizens of the school district an opportunity to get to know the candidates for superintendent. With that said, I also know elected officials don't always turn out as expected. Okaloosa County elected Sheriff Charlie Morris, which did not turn out well, but I don't recall citizens later trying to change appointing Okaloosa County Sheriff. I know many were not pleased with the past superintendent. However, I think we should be careful about using that as a reason to do away with elections. An appointed superintendent can make mistakes and fail us just as easy as an elected one. So why would we want to give our privilege to vote without any known benefits? How would such a serious change improve teachers' practice or student achievement? And shouldn't the school board and the superintendent be able to work together? Wouldn't it be better to just adjust policies so the school board and superintendent would work together better rather than give up the right to vote? There is no research that says an appointed is better than an elected superintendent, so why change? The rate of turnover of an appointed superintendent is 3.5 years, and of an elected superintendent is 7.1 years. And that is concerning to me, and I wonder why. And I think you should wonder why, and I think the supporters of appointed superintendent should wonder why. I continue to have concerns of the indoctrination of our students from those that don't honor our values. Imagine sending your daughter off to school only to find out she was headed for an abortion appointment instead. Imagine teachers and staff knowing but not informing parents because they are required to keep the secret at all cost. Well, it is already happening, and it's being taught to staff in some schools in the United States. The sex education programs in some schools is so terrible that I would be embarrassed to say what is being taught, and with role-playing in kindergarten through 12th grade. In closing, I just want to remind everyone that the Okaloosa County School District has an A grade, is number 3 in the state, and that is something we should all be very proud of. So why would we want to change? It was all done with an elected superintendent. And the second thing, the referendum is very expensive to put on the ballot. So I personally don't think it should be on any ballot at any election. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Gilbert, any questions or comments, board members?
Ms. Gilbert, where did you get your statistic about 3.5 years for appointed and 7.1? Where did that come from?
I got it from, I don't know. I'd have to look it up and email you because it's something that I read.
Okay.
I have to go back and check that out.
And so, am I hearing you that you would not be in favor of, I know how you feel about the superintendent should be elected. Are you not in favor at all of asking the citizens whether they want to keep that status quo or making a change?
No, I'm not. That's what I said at the very end, that I would not be in favor of that. That putting that on the ballot, that's, from I heard, $50,000 to $90,000 just to put it on the ballot. And I don't think it's important enough to put on the ballot, to be quite honest. I want to continue electing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gilbert. All right, so the next guest we have is Mr. Ed Gilbert, also from Niceville. Welcome, Mr. Gilbert.
Good evening, and thank you for listening to my concerns. Ed Gilbert, Niceville, Florida, the husband of the bride that was before me there. I just want to talk a little bit about, again, about elected versus appointed. I said your election to, and I'm talking about you people, to the school board allowed me to get to know you as candidates. But more importantly, I got to know you as individuals. Individuals truly concerned about the education and welfare of the students your leadership positively impacts. Without the year or more of campaigning, this would not have been possible. The election process afforded me the opportunity of calling on you to answer my questions personally or discussing my concerns personally, with you then knowing exactly who I was. The same situation exists now, and I'm very comfortable, and I am assured that you are still listening to my concerns. That doesn't mean you necessarily agree with them, but I know you're all listening. Voters like myself can expect similar opportunities for our upcoming superintendent election, only if you choose not to recommend a change. I personally know our current superintendent, Marcus Chambers, and I want to keep this opportunity to know all future superintendents. And the current election process affords voters like myself multiple opportunities to get to know that particular person. In conclusion, without any assurance that an appointed superintendent will prevent human error and no quantitative or qualitative benefits to measure, I believe the answer for the school board is very clear. The bottom line is this: we don't need to change the light bulb for a district that continues to shine brightly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gilbert. All right, colleagues, any questions or comments for Mr. Gilbert? All right, thank you again, Mr. Gilbert.
Thank you again.
Yes, sir. All right, so the next blue card I have, is it Tamara Baltzel? Okay, I'm sorry. You'll get a chance to say your name. All right, and so we'll give you 4 minutes, okay?
My name is Tamara Baltzel. I think most of you know me. I've communicated through the superintendent. I live in Destin, Florida. I've spent days, weeks, and months going through the proper channels trying to get someone to further look into and fully investigate what I believe to be a serious situation involving safety, bullying, abuse of power, and targeting by a teacher at Destin Middle School. I've followed policies, procedures set forth by Okaloosa County District that are supposed to benefit our children, parents, and staff,
All right,
only to
let me-
find out.
Excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt you,
Mhm.
but I think I heard you say in the very beginning that you have spoken with the superintendent,
I have.
okay? And this concerns a particular matter
It does.
involving maybe, is it your child?
It is.
Okay. And I guess what's incumbent upon me to ask
Yes,
of the
sir.
superintendent,
Sure.
is this matter under investigation?
No, sir.
It is not.
Okay. And Mr. Attorney, you have anything to weigh in at this juncture on this particular matter?
If I could just tell you what I was told, and that way you can tell me if I'm wrong.
Okay, all
I
right.
contacted the Florida Department of Education,
Okay.
and they directed me that this was how I file a complaint with you against the superintendent's office. And maybe I was given the wrong information, but that is what I was told when I contacted them.
Well, it would depend upon the nature of what that is. Certainly, something like that could be sent to the board, but the board does not have the authority to discipline the superintendent.
Correct, but I don't have the right to sit here and tell you what's
You do.
happening.
Yeah,
I just didn't want to
let me
mislead you.
answer your question this way.
Sure.
If they had said to me, because I'm not aware of the situation, that it was under investigation, well, then there would have been some legalities associated with us discussing it.
Yes,
So
sir.
That's why I asked that question.
Absolutely. I understand.
And because you can imagine, we field all kind of things that come here.
Certainly.
And so that answers my question then, that it's not a matter under investigation.
No,
We're
sir.
not compelled by any statutes concerning investigations.
Correct.
If you, I guess I would just caution or try to assist by that you use caution in identifying any faculty or staff or.
I won't do
what-
that. I'll
I
identify
understand.
them as
I'm ju-
teachers.
I'm just trying to help. That's all.
Yes, sir. I read through.
Okay, all right, all
I
right.
feel as I am fully armed.
Okay, all right. Well, I just, everyone's not, and so sometimes when I say things, people already know.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it.
But sometimes they don't either. So, all right, then proceed.
Give me just a second.
Sure, I won't hold that, all my remarks against your time either.
No, that's okay. I'm just trying to figure out where I stopped. Okay. This is not a one-and-done situation. I've had numerous conversations, phone calls, emails regarding the issue, only to be surprised that these are ongoing issues at Destin Middle School. My child has been targeted by his teacher, singled out, made to feel humiliated, pitted by his friends, and brushed aside. There is no transparency as to how a decision was drawn by the superintendent and staff not to reopen an investigation that was clearly not complete to begin with. Looking at the investigative reports and talking with staff and involved parties, the words that were being repeated to me, and I quote, are, "Traditionally, athletic coaches have rules, standards, and expectations for their players on the field." The investigator went on to say that it is within his purview to issue discipline and infractions. It was noted that his discipline was not harsh and did not appear to violate any policies or professional standards. However, my son did nothing wrong and no infraction was documented, so why was he being disciplined? No disciplinary action was taken, written up by any school official regarding my son. However, my son was jumped from behind in the hallway, and the total incident was captured on video. So basically, it was up to one investigator, the investigator who didn't know the policies, procedures, or code of conduct, and admitted that he was just there to do an investigation. The teacher didn't know the situation, so how could he issue punishment, especially in his own personal classroom environment at his own discretion? These are children, minor child, that are not paid to play a sport and are supposed to be encouraged to participate in strong programs that develop athletes' mental, physical, and emotional well-being. I was told by all parties on different occasions that my complaint on how my son was being treated would probably not be investigated because of the historical relationship between coaches and players. So basically what was being told to me is that the coach can do whatever he wants with no recourse. What I and my son have been dealing with over the last several months is the very reason why people don't trust our schools. This is the reason why we have had approximately 15 teachers resign, retire, or transfer from Destin Middle School. We have child abuse incidents in the newspaper and 8 people arrested. Our schools don't have accountability or an investigative process. As a parent, I have watched my son be tormented by his coach, teachers, staff, and his friends. He has lost his right as a student to try out for the baseball team and to be fairly looked at as a baseball player. This is my child who loves baseball, and this is his way of escaping stresses. It is his love, and it has been taken away from him. I couldn't even have him talk to the school counselor because she told me that she can meet with Fisher from time to time regarding school stresses as it relates to academics, but cannot discuss specifics relating to a teacher or coach. No wonder bad things are happening in our schools if counselors don't have an open door policy to deal with student stresses. I will say it again, a teacher who has no knowledge of a situation and is not in charge of discipline at the school has no right to discipline a child inside his classroom based on his or her own feelings or hearsay about a situation. Nor does a teacher coach at any time have the right to target a child in the athletic environment associated in the school system. I provided proof that this happened based on teams and who played in coach's involvement with me after disciplining
30 seconds.
my child. I have asked that a full investigation be opened. I was advised by the Department of Education that I need to file a formal complaint with the school district against the superintendent based on his actions being involved. You've heard my complaint. I'm asking for an investigation, and I will submit formal documentation.
All right, thank you. All right, so I guess when I first asked, was there an active investigation? The answer was no, there's not. But I think what I heard Mom say is that there was an investigation. Is that correct?
Correct.
And so there is a documented investigation on file.
That is correct.
And so what I am personally going to do is that I'm going to review that investigation. And colleagues, I would suggest that you do the same, and you know how to do that. You've done that before. Dr. Hale, I know you'll have that document ready for us to take a look at, all right? What it sounds like is that you didn't agree with the conclusions in that investigation. Is that correct?
That is correct, based on what I said. Yes, sir.
And you asked for the investigation to be reopened.
Yes, sir.
And the district chose not to do so.
And Dr. Hale, if you'd come forward for a second.
Hey there.
Just really quickly, if you would outline the steps a parent or an employee can take if at the end of an investigation they're not good with the outcome of that investigation, what can they do? And then also, what did we do in this particular situation?
Okay, according to board policy, there's a 10-day window once the complainant receives the investigation with which they can notify in writing to the superintendent their desire to appeal.
Yes, sir.
Then, once that 10-day window has come and gone, there's then a 10-day window to set up that meeting with the complainant. Then, once that meeting has happened, there's a 15-day window to submit in writing the appeal, the decision by the superintendent. That's all just outlined right there in board policy.
Very good.
Those are the things that we did. Mr. Chambers and myself did meet with Ms. Baltzell over this matter.
Well, that's good. Let me make sure I
Sure.
understand the facts.
Sure.
I think you probably said it, but I might have missed it. So Mom received the investigative report and filed an appeal. Is that correct?
Yes.
Appropriately filed.
Can I say one thing? I did receive the investigative report, not within the parameters outlined in the policies procedures. It took substantially longer. I was emailing, asking. I mean, those are important things.
I understand.
Time has
I understand.
definitely expired on their
Okay,
part.
Right. But in
I
any
did receive
case-
it.
Yes, ma'am. So, and you did request an appeal. All right.
Yes, sir.
And so that appeal went to the superintendent.
Correct.
And I think I heard you just say that you met
Correct.
together. And then what happened?
So the superintendent then issued his appeals finding,
Okay.
and that was the last I heard until tonight. So
Well, we did have a conversation, and I told you I would be taking this further.
Oh,
We had a
did
phone call.
talk. Mhm.
Okay.
And I think that I relayed to you in the phone call about the district policy that says in the 15-day, in the written response back from the superintendent, that the findings of the superintendent, that decision is final at that point according to board policy.
Mr. McInnes, any comment about that regarding the policy and the procedure?
No, that seems consistent with my memory of what's in that policy.
Okay. All right.
And there is no appeal to the board on that in the policy?
The appeal they're talking about is to the investigative report
Okay,
and the
but-
findings there, and the board's policy, I don't have it in front of me, but I know the board's policy does indicate that the superintendent's decision on that element of the thing is final.
Okay.
All right. All right, any other questions, colleagues, about this so far? Because I'm not prepared to conclude it yet.
Right, yeah.
All right.
So after that, now that's when you're taking it to the next level? That's when you called the Florida Department of Education, is that correct?
I did, yes, ma'am. I called the superintendent's office and spoke to several different staff there to find out. I've been trying to follow every policy and procedure that was set in place to make sure I was doing that.
Sure.
So then it took me a little while to get a hold of the right people at the Department of Education, but I did finally reach someone that told me that this is what I had to do that. So, I mean, I'm very transparent. I've also I've also applied to open an investigation with them. I have not yet against the teacher involved.
All right.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chambers, anything else?
Oh, I would say, and so first of all, this is obviously well within your right, and just like we had a good conversation when we spoke. So I do appreciate the fact that that you're here, that you're going through this process. I also would encourage you, just like you said, Dr. White, I would encourage each of you to go to look at the investigation and take time to thoroughly look at it and come to whatever decision that you would come to.
Now, of course, my question, Chairman, is
Yes, sir.
whatever decisions we may come to, do we have any authority to change any of this? And I guess that's a question for the attorney. I have spoken to this parent on a couple of
very good.
occasions
All
while
right.
this was going on.
Sure, it's in
and-
your district.
and kept up with investigations and how it was proceeding,
I see.
and understood that the conclusion at the end was basically the district felt they were not compelled to do anything. And so at this point, my question to Mr. McGinnis is this a decision that rests in our hands at all?
Well, I'm not familiar with the investigation or this file, but what I would say is that the school board on its own it does not have the authority to just reach out and recommend the discipline of an employee. That's vested in the
understand.
superintendent. You have the ability to vote on those recommendations, but you can't generate them yourself.
Yep.
So that kind of recommendation comes out of the superintendent's office before you can act on that. So I suppose if you wanted to review the investigative report, you certainly have a right to do that. And if you had issues or concerns about process or procedure or policy, you could discuss those with the superintendent. But those persons investigating and those persons involved in the investigative process are under the management of the superintendent, not the school board.
So I guess our step is for everybody to review it, as the chairman said. And after that, I'm not sure what step we would take, but at least we understand what the process was.
Does my complaint go to you individually, to one person? I just want to make sure I'm getting it to the proper person. I mean, I'm just going to kind of send you what I've talked about, but I wasn't sure who to send it directly to.
In my mind, I only remember one complaint that the school board received, and it was forwarded to the Department of Education. But we made no action on the complaint. We made no decision on the complaint. It was simply more of a transmittal, if you will, as opposed to us doing anything. Because, quite frankly, in my opinion, I think it is as the attorney has stated. The superintendent is in charge of personnel. And this school board, while we're asked to act on his recommendations regarding personnel, we have no authority to discipline employees, to suspend, to hire, or to fire. We have no authority under law to do any of that unless it is through the superintendent's recommendation. Now, that's my understanding, but I am not a lawyer.
Total power.
Right. That's it. Well, in
I know.
personnel, that's exactly right. In personnel. And I would also take it a step further and say, probably in just day-to-day operations. I mean, I used to often, it's not a joking matter, but would tease folks and say, nobody deserves more than one boss. And there's 5 of us here. And you can see that would be quite confusing if we were all running out and directing employees on what they were supposed to do. And that
Sure.
frankly falls under his domain.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Any comments or questions, colleagues?
And I think I might say one other piece. And as you know, we do get investigations, and as you do know, those investigations come to me. And I will say that I absolutely take time to thoroughly look through each and every investigation. But what I also understand is there's going to be times when, and not only here, but there'll be times where people don't agree with decisions, and I understand that fully well. So once again, I do appreciate you being here.
Okay, anything else, Tom?
Has the situation gotten any better?
No, ma'am.
Anything else? All right, ma'am. Anything else you want to say or add?
No, I'm good.
All right.
Thank
All
you
right,
so much.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
All right. And so now, now I'll do the best I can with names, but I used to always have someone else announce names at graduation. All right, Mrs. Ann Ziegenhorn. Okay. And you are from Shalimar, is that correct?
Yes.
All right, welcome. And of course, you'll have 4 minutes like everybody else.
Okay, hi there.
Hi.
Thank you for having us. I'm Ann Ziegenhorn, and I am from Shalimar, Florida. I'm here in support of my friend Mara and echoing her. So instead of repeating pretty much the same thing she said, I can add to it just a little bit. My son was homeschooled, and in his homeschooling, he was able to pick whatever school he wished to go play sports at. He dreamed of playing for Destin Middle School soccer. I called the school board, said, hey, is this feasible? Another parent did as well because their child went to STEM. And they said yes. So our children were able to try out for Destin Middle School. Upon arrival, we were informed that they could not try out, that the school was full, after we had already called to double check. Now, that didn't happen this year. It was last year, so it was prior to you and to Dr. Hale being there. And we were treated very similar way, very abusive in front of the children. All the kids saw everything that was happening. The other parents saw what was happening. And the athletic department was not very pleasant at that school. And the principal was not very pleasant either. I have done a little digging, and it looks like possibly the personnel in question does have a disciplinary of abusive situation, and still to date degrades and talks loud to women and had to go to anger management in the past. I do feel that that needs to be addressed because it goes to what Ms. Mara was saying.
Kim, let me interject.
Mhm.
And I appreciate you being here in support of your friend. And so, because of the direction this is kind of heading, have you had an opportunity to speak with the superintendent about this matter?
No, the superintendent at the time was under investigation.
Okay. Well, typically what we would do, and what I'm going to ask you to do, would be to converse with the superintendent about this matter. All right? Because again, he's the one that will be able to make a recommendation to the school board regarding any kind of issue or personnel matter that you're talking about. So I really think that's the best direction for this to go, that it goes straight to the superintendent, and really, because this school board, the first thing my colleagues are going to ask is, what did the superintendent say? And right now the answer is he hasn't said anything because you haven't talked to him.
And she is no longer there.
Right, but he's here.
So,
And
okay.
so that's
So you
the
can bring last
direction.
year's business up. Okay, I was just trying to
I
show you
understand.
a pattern,
I
is basically
understand.
what I was
Well,
trying to show.
That's his job.
Okay.
To determine that. And
Okay.
I'm going to ask that you take that his direction. And so unless there's anything else.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so to continue on, I just wish to reiterate what she had stated. Her son was jumped on from behind.
Were you there?
No, but it is on video.
Okay, have you seen the video?
Me personally, no.
Okay.
So I would encourage, since you're saying that you will do a review, that you please look at the video. Because then I will see that you would see that there was not a fair investigation, in my opinion. I highly recommend that. It took Mara sending multiple emails, and then it took me emailing before anybody responded. And I think that's sad. I'm a women's advocate. I'm in the public eye. And I think that that's sad that the school board, after multiple emails, did not respond to her.
Okay, time out. School board didn't get any emails.
I knew that was going to get a response.
I
haven't
look,
heard of it until today.
you know, I know you, Ann, but a lot of times people mess up between the school district and the school board.
Okay.
And I know Dr. White has explained some tonight, but the school board, unless I'm wrong, fellow school board, we didn't get any emails about this, right?
And unless I'm wrong, he didn't either.
So,
So-
Dr. Hale,
I don't know
if
who
you would
you
come forward.
contacted. We just want to make it clear,
Okay.
because I didn't get anything to respond to.
And I'd like to make it clear as well. And I could be confused from time to time potentially, but I do not remember or recall receiving several emails and not responding. Was there a situation that happened with those emails?
We did receive an initial email that started the initial investigation, and then over several months, when we didn't hear anything, we finally did hear something, and we figured out that there was an email that was going back and forth to a wrong email address, and I cleared that up with the parent at that time as well.
So correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that there were several emails that were sent to my email. However, it was the wrong email, so we were not aware that emails were being sent.
So when that was picked up on, when that was identified by the parent, she sent it to the correct one.
Yes, sir.
and we
I get it now.
Correct. So what was just being stated was inaccurate.
But not really, because we have copies and your names are all on it. So that's how I knew. All of your names are on it. So
I don't recall
all I know is
that.
that I can see who it was sent to.
Would you check my email, because I never received anything?
Well, I can print it out.
Thank you.
Well, let me tell you what I do when I get those, when they're about personnel. It's real easy.
Direct it. And that's fine.
And I don't know that Mr. Chambers
She was just
has-
desperate in reaching out to anybody and everybody.
I don't think Mr. Chambers has a forwarded email from me regarding this situation. Because we technically, and I hate to use the term, but we're powerless to handle those things. That falls in his bailiwick for him to resolve. So I don't recall any email.
What is this public forum for exactly then?
Well, usually it pertains to an item on the agenda. Normally, but folks can come and do like you've done. It's entirely possible, and sometimes we give direction and we try to help. And just like I've said, your concerns should first go to him.
Okay.
And then if you're unhappy or unresolved about that, I guess you can do what others have done. You can go to DOE. At one time I had a parent take her issue to the president. But those are all avenues that you can pursue, and you can come here as well. Although, I'll tell you, it's a little complicated because, as the attorney has explained, and I've tried to explain, personnel is really not an area that the school board is involved in unless he makes a recommendation. In fact, I'll just put it out there so that everyone understands how serious this is. Should the school board get involved in a personnel matter that's not his recommendation, potentially you, the taxpayers, are subject to litigation. And in fact, it happened in Bay County. The superintendent of schools in Bay County sued his own school board over a personnel matter. So we're a little reticent to cross into that area. All right, colleagues, anything else?
Was any phone call made?
Oh,
You know-
yeah. Oh, yes.
Okay, so you said emails, and evidently there was a email glitch, so I would think maybe the next thing would be to pick up the phone. Did that happen?
Yes, and they made an appointment. Yeah, and I sat in
Okay.
on the appointment
Okay.
and everything.
Gotcha.
So
Okay,
just trying to get it to where it's looked at properly.
absolutely.
Just clarifying, once that phone call came in,
Oh,
an
they were quick.
appointment was made
Yes.
right away.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, oh, very cordial, very everything, yes. I mean, Marcus Chambers and Dr. Hale, yeah, no, they listened. I just feel that the video didn't get appropriate attention to actually what happened, and to say that.
I see. Well,
I might, Chairman,
Yeah,
point out
sure.
one reason that you are allowed to come here and that we welcome you here is the policies that Mr. Chambers enforces are written by this board. We can't reach back and change something after the fact, but if there's a problem that we can see that you brought to us, we can change the policy so it doesn't happen again in the future.
Okay.
And, that's the object and the reason that you come and talk to us, I hope.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Okay.
thank you. All right, so I see we have Mr. Patrick Ryan. Welcome, Mr. Ryan. I know you know, good evening, I know you know the routine.
Yes,
4
sir.
minutes.
Good evening. 2 weeks ago, you dismissed some poll data that we brought you as something that was irrelevant. We think that's a mistake because 67% of the likely November voters in this county who will decide a tax referendum think it's urgent to have a referendum on superintendent selection before the fall election. Our polling also shows a referendum on superintendent selection would pass by an 18% margin, and that's more than 3 times the margin of error of our poll. You might have doomed a tax referendum before it's even discussed in earnest. Mr. Bryant, you mentioned polling prior to President Trump's victory in 2016, but that's a terrible analogy. The inaccurate polls then were in 4 Rust Belt states where the president was projected to lose by slightly more or less than the margin of error of the polls. The margin of error on our poll is 5% for those who read that document, and it found a 67% majority, which beats a simple majority by more than 3 times the margin of error. Dr. Kelly, you mentioned that superintendent selection method has nothing to do with an individual's ethics and moral compass, and that's correct. But recent events in this county and this district prove that what's important is what citizens of Okaloosa County can do about a corrupt or failing elected superintendent who lacks that proper moral or ethical compass, and that is absolutely nothing, except hope the governor acts even when it's about child abuse. Ms. Ivanchek, your reasons for refusing to hold a referendum on superintendent selection are mystifying. To say that having to implement the people's decision will make you too busy to then ask the taxpayers for more taxes makes it appear that you don't want to work hard on behalf of the people who elected you. You know very well that the Florida School Board Association's required timeline is shorter than the available time you'd have if this referendum passed in March. And you know that if this board needs more time to implement a new hiring system, you can simply appoint an interim superintendent, which is a common practice. You also know the Florida School Board Association will do most of the work for you. Several other entities, including the Okaloosa County Commission and local city councils, already hire county or city managers, so this would not be a new paradigm or endeavor in Okaloosa County. We still stand ready to work with you to better the district, but it appears some of you aren't interested in working with us or taking input from the voters to improve accountability in our district leadership, especially when it comes to child abuse, as 5 more district employees have been arrested this year alone, the last one just a few weeks ago. This systemic problem hasn't been solved, and you're refusing to take any steps to solve it. Mr. Destin, we thank you for being the lone voice on the board to publicly state that we should find a way to let the voters have a say on the future of superintendent selection prior to asking them to fork over millions of their hard-earned dollars in additional taxes. Politics beats out democracy in doing the right thing for now, but it won't always. People are disgusted and voters are angry with the millions they're going to pay for back pay, legal fees, and lawsuit payouts. They're tired of seeing district employees arrested for abusing or covering up child abuse. Ultimately, this is about improving accountability so we properly spend taxpayer dollars to provide our children a quality education and a safe environment and not abuse them. It certainly looks like right now politics is being prioritized over accountability. I'd like to finish with 2 questions. One for Mr. Bryant. 2 weeks ago, he said something as important as a superintendent selection referendum should be on the general election ballot, and I'd like to know why he doesn't support putting it on the next general election ballot. And secondly, Ms. Ivanchek, you said 2 weeks ago that you've done more research since you've made a motion on a referendum back in July, and I'll ask when I finish if you would share the results of that research, which led you to flip-flop to a totally opposite position on this matter. Before the answers go, I'd like to address one thing that the first speaker said, okay? Statistics. There's one appointed superintendent in Florida who has not worked in Florida before, so this entire fear of outsiders is nothing but demagoguery and fear-mongering. And secondly, you all know, I don't need to tell you, the cost of the referendum.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan.
Thank you.
All right, colleagues, any comments, questions?
Is Mr. Bryant going to speak?
It's up to Mr. Bryant.
Is he still there? Mr.
I'm
Bryant?
still there.
Okay.
Okay.
I can repeat the question if he needs me to.
I don't know that Mr. Bryant chooses to respond, Mr. Ryan. Any comments or?
I just choose not to respond at this time.
All right. Any
Okay.
questions? Ms.
I
Vancheck?
will respond to the question you asked me. Yes, I did some research. I spoke with Mr. Paul Lux, the supervisor of elections, to ask him to lay out for me all the scenarios for putting this referendum out there. And so what he indicated to me was a little bit different than what you've been saying, I think, on the cost. His prediction at this point is that March presidential primary, preference primary, is going to mainly be for voters who are registered as Democrats, okay? And so if that's so, when we put the referendum then, he has to create a ballot for everybody else who's not a non-Democrat, okay? There's a major cost factor for that. Somewhere, not only advertising it, but printing, all the different things. And he quoted round numbers, $40,000 to $50,000 to put it on that election time. So he told me that comes under the county commission. So I called Mr. Graham Fountain with the county commission and asked him, but the one thing he assured me was that the commission would not pay that, which would fall back to this board. So that is a lot of money for us to have to come up with to put that on that March election. I don't see how we can do that and face our citizens when we've cut back bare bones on our budget and yet come up with something like that. So is your group willing to compromise and put that on the November election?
I mean, we think you need to get it on the ballot somewhere. March is preferable to November. The decision is yours. We are advocating let the people weigh in. So it's not a matter of us saying that we would compromise. We do not have a vote in this. There are 5 votes that decide this, and it's right there, and of course, Mr. Bryan's on the phone.
But you've been pushing for the March.
Yes.
So what I'm asking you is, when you've come up and talked to us, you've talked March, okay? There hasn't been a lot of discussion about putting it on in the general election in November, just a couple of things. So that's what I'm asking you, is are you now going to say, okay, will you put it on in November in the general election? Is that what you're saying, or?
No, I'm saying you should put it on the ballot at some time in the future. If it doesn't work out in March, I mean, we think March is the best reason for a lot of reasons, but if it doesn't work, then certainly you ought to put it in November. That's going to allow the board to get some credibility back with the voters. And I think that is something that would probably help the tax referendum, which is probably going to be an uphill climb, and a lot of people acknowledge that. Now, as far as March, that is not what Mr. Lux told me. And we would have to go look at the county's budget, but what he told me several months ago is that they usually budget for elections and that they have a certain amount that's budgeted. It's not usually line item. And so he doesn't expect the county commission to take back budget money for him. But I think the other question is, too, you're assuming that there's not going to be a Republican primary, but there is likely going to be a Republican primary because there's already 3 declared candidates running against the president. Let's just look historically at
Okay, let me tell you what he said to that, because
Okay.
I asked him that. And he told me that just because there are opponents, okay, doesn't mean the Florida Republican Party will put them on a ballot
Right.
in Florida.
That's exactly what I was gonna
And at this point,
address.
he predicted they would not.
Okay, well, let's look
saying.
historically. In 2004, the last year we had a Republican incumbent president. The last year we had a Republican incumbent president. There were 4 individuals besides President Bush who filed to get in the Republican primary. They were obscure, no-name candidates who had some agenda. They had never held office. They were not none of them had any experience in public. So it was these were what you would refer to as fringe candidates. Okay, they were not legitimate candidates. Right now, you've got William Weld. What is his name? Walsh. Look, these are candidates that have national experience and national name recognition, okay? So if we want to sit here and debate whether the Republicans are going to put it on, we don't know and we don't control that. I think really the question you want to ask is, since private financing of referendums is legal in Florida, and we've come to you with Attorney General opinion on that, would we step up and pay that? And that's certainly something we would consider doing if the cost of the ballots goes that high. So,
Can I just interject?
Sure, absolutely.
And I haven't talked to Mr. Lutz or Mr. Fountain about this and the cost or anything. But I seem to remember that if there's no Republican candidate on the ballot in March, and we put this item up and the board votes to do that and the county commissioners vote to do that, but there's no Republican on the ballot, the cost, I think, will primarily come through the cost of the absentee ballots that will have to be mailed to all the voters, just because we've now made it a general election. Is that your understanding?
no, sir, it's not.
Okay.
My understanding is because if there is no other Republican candidate, then they have to print ballots for Republicans, third
Right.
party, and independents. So not necessarily absentee ballots.
Well, that
would be part of it.
Well, because the cost, there's high costs there because of postage. And if
Right.
I remember correctly, there are about 13,000 to 16,000 absentee ballots that would have to be mailed, printed and mailed. And then, so let's just say a dollar each on the low end. So that cost is inherent, that I think would occur if there is no Republican
Right.
on the ballot. And so for me, the big cost there is on absentee ballots. But, however, I heard you clarify and say that this might be a cost that your group would be willing to fund.
Yes, sir. We are willing to discuss funding that. If you want to put that on the March referendum, I think it's entirely within the realm of possibility that if it's necessary, we would step up and fund it.
Okay. And so in my mind, should there be a board member that would put this on the agenda, and should there be a motion, I would think that motion would be very specific.
Yes.
And it would address the issue of cost to the county commissioners.
I think it should.
And it would, in my mind, what it would say would be something along the lines, school board's not paying the cost.
And I don't see that you would have a problem with that. In
Right.
fact, I think you'd get support from voters for that.
Yes, sir?
For that.
Okay. And then the county commission would have to decide if they were going to pay it or if they were going to kick it back and say, we're not going to pay it. That's kind of how I see it could break out.
I think what they would, and I don't know, you'd have to go to the attorneys on this because of the history with, the Attorney General opinion in
Yep.
the past. So that would have to be something to work out. I guess the question would be, would the board go to the county commission with the request, with, a rider or something saying
Caveat.
we have a private financing source available? Or would they not? Now, of course, knowing any good bureaucrats on the county commission, I'm sure they're going to come back and say, "Oh, we'd love somebody else to pay this." So,
I understand.
but that's and the thing is, now qualifying for the primaries won't be until November 30th. Won't close until then, so you won't really know.
Right.
But you would still actually have time to find out if the Republican Party is going to submit more than just President Trump's name. So,
Okay. All right.
Chairman, if I may?
Yes, sir.
I would have a couple of comments.
Okay.
There will be an election in August, whether there's a challenge of the president or not, because we have county commission races, school board races, if they're not telling me a story about that, and a superintendent race. So there will be an August election.
Right.
Is that an option? It could be. The other option that I offered at the last meeting was for them to do a mail out, about 3 times as expensive,
Mhm.
but it satisfies my desire to have as many people participate in the election as possible. everybody will be mailed the ballot. If they don't send it back in, then it's shame on them, not shame on us for scheduling an election when they were not going to have much of a chance to vote. So we still have a couple of options here, and then there's always the November. And when we entertained the half cent in the past, and even the time it passed, I believe that the cost of it was picked up by somebody besides these entities. I know that's what we were talking about when we were talking about putting the half cent on last time. We made it clear that, and I think our perennial school board member made it quite clear that it had to be paid for by the folks who wanted to put it on, that we couldn't put public money into it because he thought that if we did, then that would cause it perhaps not to pass.
Sure, tainted.
Yep, and that makes sense. So those are still options.
May I address that, sir?
Yes.
Okay. A mail-out ballot is probably $175,000 to $250,000 is what Paul Lux told me. Okay. I don't have historical data available. I could go back and look, but to be honest with you, I think the turnout for a mail-out historically, when there have been, is going to be usually lower than the 39% that they had in the presidential primary in March of 2016. So I doubt seriously that our group would commit to funding a mail-out ballot, because you have 3 other already scheduled elections that we could hold the referendum during. So it's hard to justify the cost. I'm not ruling it out completely, but it would just be difficult to justify that cost when there's 3 other elections coming up where we could do this. And certainly, if you're worried about turnout, well, heck, the November election is no cost, and there's not a turnout. It's the best turnout. Just if you want to just look at pure turnout. So I'm not trying to poo-poo the mail-out idea, but I just don't know if that's something that's really worth the cost right there. If it were that, if a choice between doing a mail-out sometime, then I'd say just do it in November is probably going to be your better bet.
Could be. Of course, the opportunity to vote is what I'm talking about, and you're right.
I understand
A
that.
lot of people won't send it in, but it's, as I said, it's a shame on them. They got the opportunity, and that's the important part. The opportunity to vote is something that is pretty sacred.
And just to be clear, though, as far as the opportunity to vote, if this board votes to put it on the March ballot, everybody has the opportunity to vote. It is not just a Democratic primary. It then becomes a countywide election, and everyone has the right to vote. Everybody can cast a ballot, not just Democrats. And we can let's not debate anymore whether there's going to be a Republican primary. It's beyond our control. But everyone would have the opportunity to vote if this referendum gets on any scheduled election.
I understand.
That's a fact. So.
Anything else, colleagues?
Mr. Destin, you were talking about the August primary.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any concerns of the challenge of if that were to pass and we were going to an appointed superintendent at that point? I'm not sure the date of that primary, what the challenge would be for this board to get someone in place.
There wouldn't be any challenge because whoever won the election, I believe, would still serve 4 years, and the change comes at the end of the 4 years.
In the August one?
Correct.
That's right.
Okay, so only March. Okay, thank you for
Yeah, the only
clarifying that.
time it comes into play that we would have to appoint would be
In March.
the March deadline.
Thank you, sir.
Or perhaps whatever deadline the mail-in ballot.
Yes. all
If
right.
you did a mail out, and
Yeah.
Mr. McKinnis, I'll ask you to weigh in here, but my recollection from what you said at a board meeting several months ago was that if the election is completed and the results are certified prior to closing of qualification, which I believe is June 30th
That's exactly
for the
right.
August election, then for the referendum to pass, there would be no election. But if the results are certified of a referendum and it passes after qualifying in June 30th is closed, then somebody is going to get elected for a 4-year term. And then you have plenty of time.
That's my understanding.
And that was my understanding from talking to Mr. Lopes.
And I just will reiterate my last comment from the last meeting, and that is, I fully believe that we need to have one lone referendum this time around, and that needs to be for a sales tax. If you've lived or been a principal in any of our buildings or an instructor, you know how desperately in need our facilities are. And I think that need overshadows the desire to change the way we get our superintendents at this point in our legacy, in our history of existing as Okaloosa County Schools.
Well, thank you, Doctor. I'd recommend doing the superintendent selection referendum in March and having your cake and eating it too. Getting the voters on your side.
I don't eat cake very frequently. Thank you, though.
Well, that's all right. We'll find you something else.
All right, anything else, colleagues? All right, thank you, Mr. Ryan.
Thank you, sir.
All right, so moving on now to Mr. Ryan Flynn. Mr. Flynn? And Meadowbrook Court, Niceville, Florida. And Mr. Flynn, we'll do the 4 minutes, and you're here to speak about the superintendent referendum.
Yes, sir, and
All right.
I won't take that long.
Okay.
But, I'm a parent of 2 children attending Okaloosa County schools. My oldest is a special needs student. I followed the recent news where members of this board refused to give voters the opportunity to decide in a referendum whether to enact systemic reform to improve accountability in our district leadership and to potentially improve child safety. I've read that members of this board claimed that we just had one bad situation. However, 5 more child abuse arrests have been made this year alone, and 3 separate incidents, meaning that there is an ongoing cultural problem that must be addressed by systemic reform. Anything short of this is just a Band-Aid or half measure. I also read that the board doesn't want to let voters decide on the superintendent selection method because you're worried you may not have time to follow the voters' direction and hire a superintendent. And you instead want to focus on asking those same voters to approve a tax increase. It sounds like politics trumps child safety and accountability here. That's nothing short of disgraceful. If you think the voters in Okaloosa County will approve a tax increase while this board plays politics and refuses to allow voters to enact systemic change, you must not be in touch with those voters. I recommend that you go back and read some of the multitude of the emails you received and think about this issue again. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Flynn.
Mr. Flynn.
All right, just stand by, sir. Mr. Flynn, they may have comments or questions, or may not. Any questions or comments?
Mr. Flynn, so you're saying, and what you're saying there is that you truly believe that the citizens of this county do not understand the pitiful shape our infrastructure's in, and that they would allow the fact that we wouldn't put this referendum out to stop that so that our students could not so we would not have the money to fix the buildings and improve our bus fleet, that they would really hold that back because we would not put a referendum about how our superintendent is chosen? Do you really believe that, sir?
I believe it would weigh in. I believe that's up to them.
Okay, that's disappointing to hear, but because I don't know how anybody who's been paying any kind of attention in this district could not understand the dire need of our infrastructure. They saw it with a stadium, and that's just one example of what's going on, and that's really, although it's a big structure, just a small part of the big picture. And to me, you're saying that's playing politics, but I think that's being very short-sighted of citizens, and you're just saying that's your opinion, which you have the right, and so I'm just hoping that our citizens are not that narrow-minded and are open to knowing that regardless of how it comes out on the issue of the superintendent piece, that they will certainly understand that we need to get that sales tax, which is the fairest way to do this, so that we can improve. I don't even know what will happen if this has to go another 4 years beyond the 2020 election. I can't imagine the dire situation. So I'm hoping that, no offense that you're wrong, that people will go ahead and look, if that does get on the 2020 election, which I hope it does, that people will certainly pay attention to that. But thank you for your comments. I appreciate it.
All right, anything else, colleagues? All right, thank you, Mr. Flynn. All right, and so the last card I have at this juncture is Mr. Steve Chambers. Welcome, Mr. Chambers.
How y'all doing tonight?
We're fine, and of course, you know you have 4 minutes.
Yes, sir.
All right, and then they may have questions or comments
Sure.
when you finish.
Steve Chambers, Fort Walton Beach, Florida. I want to go on record. I have forwarded you every email that's been erroneously sent to me. And you know that. Over the years, we've had many emails back and forth. You know, the funny thing about this is we currently have an appointed superintendent. I heard people talking about getting to meet with him and talk to him about stuff. During what election? That decision was not made by we, the people in Okaloosa County. That decision was made by the governor. Out of our hands. So, you know, when I listen, and like Ms. Kelly, Dr. Kelly, you stated, we don't want to confuse the electorate with 2 referendums. But the thing about it is, voters have lost faith in our school district. Yeah, we understand. I mean, I know, I'm there every day. I understand what we need. We need money to improve our infrastructure. But what are we reading in newspapers? Hundreds of thousands and thousands of dollars in lawsuits. You know, and so what's the uninformed voter going to think? This half-cent sales tax is going to go to pay those lawsuits off. The uninformed voter. And anytime you have to start off a campaign with what we're not going to do with the money, you've shot yourself in the foot on what you're going to do with the money. Our previous superintendent probably gave the classic example of how not to start a half-cent sales tax. At the Destin Chamber of Commerce, she said, we're going to build a high school in Destin. And every pocketbook north of the Bay closed to an idea of a half-cent sales tax. Right now, you're facing the same thing, but just from a different angle. How many articles have been in the paper about the lawsuits? How many people are going to take the time to go, oh, they can't use that money for the lawsuits? But it's when you're right on the heels and voter confidence is not that great in the school board. That's why I'm a firm believer. I want to vote. We talk about St. Johns County. That's the epicenter of education. They've had an appointed superintendent forever, and they've done a really good job. We look up to them. If we wanted to know how to do that process, we've sent people over to St. Johns County before. We could send more to talk to them. We could just email them and they could send us the packet. You know, the thing is that voters are seeing how the school board members are responding to this. And then they will vote accordingly. I'm a firm believer. We need this half-cent sales tax. But I just don't see anybody. The people I talk to, they say, yeah, we need it, but we don't trust what they're going to do with it. You know, when it's us and they, it's not a good situation. What are they going to do with it? And with that,
All right, thank you, Mr. Chambers. Stand by just for a moment. Any questions or comments, colleagues?
I would just like
have
to
one.
Go ahead, he's already started.
Okay. The uninformed voter are a problem, but the fact is right now that money will be spent as determined by the school board, our superintendent, make recommendations. So whether we have an appointed or elected school superintendent is not going to affect how the money is spent, because that's the one thing we do. We determine how the money is going to be spent. So I understand your argument, and I think that you're right, because a lot of people don't understand exactly how this system works, and that's going to be the great hurdle that we have to get over. But whether the superintendent is elected or appointed is not going to really determine how the money is spent, to the best of my knowledge.
Right, and I would like to comment to 2 comments that you made, if I don't lose my train of thought. One was that you used the example of the fact that we do have an appointed superintendent currently, and you're right, we do. One of your other members who spoke said that under the current administration, we've had 5 additional arrests. So we've had arrests in our county under the last 2 years, under both elected and appointed. So really, that doesn't make your point with your other colleague. And secondly, I firmly do believe that when I go around, and people who know me and people witness me, I'm everywhere. I don't just hole up in an office. I never have. I'm all over this district: Laurel Hill, Destin, Crestview, Fort Walton Beach. I'm everywhere. I hear the constituents. I hear them talk about. And what I hear is they do have renewed faith in the school board, these 5 people, separate from any other office or official. And as Mr. Destin just explained, we 5 will be voting on how monies are spent. Not anybody in that big chair. No respect to Mr. Chambers. I do respect you, you know that. But the person in that chair doesn't make decisions for the budget. They do make decisions for personnel, as has been explained numerous times since I've been in this chair. So in some manners, I know that we all have our motivations, hopefully led by those that put us in our chairs. That is my hope, and that is what I certainly try to do, and I believe all of us try to do. And our appointed superintendent, I believe he's doing that too. I believe we all are trying to speak to the meaningful comments and the meaningful energy given to us by our constituents. With that being said, most of the people I talk to and interact with are for us not having a referendum at all. But for us to entertain the idea is us allowing you to have our ear. And I believe I've tried to do that. I've tried to do the research. I've been addressed by name many times, and I've taken that and I've tried to go home and do my homework and come back with a plausible idea or reference that we can all look into. I just wanted to make that plain that I am not here to be your opponent or necessarily your adversary. I'm trying to just get to the heart of what is best for Okaloosa County. With respect and regard for St. John's and Escambia and all these other districts, we are Okaloosa. We have our own culture and our own climate. And respectfully, we maintain that A status at all of our schools through all of that debacle, through whatever happened. And we did it on the backs of good, solid teachers, good parents, good community leaders, good principals, and district people that held hands together and kept the boat afloat. And I believe that that's the kind of people we have here. So respectfully, I think I'm speaking for a lot of people who talk to me, more than just who email or more than just who come to the podium, who have all of our ears and who represent Okaloosa County in general. But I do respect you for coming, and I actually agree with some of the comments that all of your people have made. There's truth in all of these sides. We're just trying to do the best for our constituents overall.
Anything else, colleagues? All right, thank you, Mr. Chambers.
Right, thank you.
Yes, sir. All right, so, we talked about this the last time we met, and as Mr. Destin's already referred to one of our longtime colleagues, you got to be able to count to 3 in this business.
True.
Okay? And until that happens, then everything stays as it is. Okay?
I would make one other comment, Chairman.
Yes, sir.
We even counting to 3 in this instance may not be good enough. We need to have some unanimity. We need to be all in agreement of how we go forward on this issue, because this is very important, and to have a divided board, even on a 3-2 to go forward, is not a good idea. So I would urge all of us to, put your thinking caps on, and if you think you can come up with a way that we could reach an agreement or a compromise that we can all agree on, that is the only way forward that I can think of.
I understand. I'll still have to vote the way I believe I should vote, no matter how my colleagues vote. So in that case, and I've been on the side of those 4-1 decisions, and I've been the one before. But three will get the job done.
They will.
And I understand what you're saying, but after last time, after we met, I was fairly convinced that there might not even be a second.
I think you correctly surmised the situation.
Right. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and continue to move forward now. All right, so that takes us through public comment, and we get into Section 7, Committee and Staff Reports, in-county travel paid for the period of August 22nd through September the 4th, 2019, presented by Mrs. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer. All right, moving on down now to consent agenda. First item of business is 8.1, approval of the consent agenda.
And I will move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Destin, second by Dr. Kelly. Any discussion? Hearing or seeing none, let's vote. Mr. Bryant?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. All right, motion carries 5-0. Thank you. All right, so now let's move on down, if you will. Slide on down that long agenda to Superintendent's Human Resources Recommendations, Section 9.1. Employees on administrative leave, presented by Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources. That was an information item. Then 9.2, Deferred Retirement Option Program, presented by Dr. Lee Hale and Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, and that also is a information item. Then 9.3, Out-of-Field Report for the 2019-2020 school year, presented by Mrs. Karen Peak, Program Director of Professional Services, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. This is an action item.
I'll move it.
Motion by Dr. Kelly,
I second it.
second by Ms. Evancheck. Any discussion?
We didn't have very many out of thousands of teachers, so I'm
Good.
pretty pleased with that report.
Yes, sir. That's real good. All right, so let's vote. All in favor? How'd you vote? Okay, motion carries 5-0. 9.4, Employment Separations, presented by Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. Need a motion?
I'll
So
move it.
moved.
That was close. Okay. Motion by Ms. Evancheck, second by Mr. Destin. Any discussion? All right, seeing none, let's vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. 9.5, Personnel Recommendations, presented by Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. Need a motion?
So moved.
Motion, Mr. Destin.
I'll second.
Second, Dr. Kelly. Any discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. All in favor? Mr. Bryant? Okay, very good. Motion carries 5-0. 9.6, Employee Transfers, presented by Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. Need a motion?
So moved.
Motion, Mr. Destin.
I'll second.
Second, Dr. Kelly. Any discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. All in favor? Mr. Bryant?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Moving down, 9.7, Employee Suspension, presented by Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, recommended by the Superintendent. Need a motion?
So moved.
Motion, Mr. Destin.
I'll second it.
Second, Ms. Evancheck. Any discussion? All right, let's vote. All in favor? Mr. Bryant?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. 9.8, Employee Suspension, presented by Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
I'll move it.
Motion, Ms. Evancheck.
Second.
Second, Mr. Destin. Any discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. All in favor? Mr. Bryant?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Moving down, 9.9, Reinstatement Reimbursement of Sick Leave Due to Line of Duty Illness, Injury, Medical Examination, presented by Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
So moved.
Motion, Dr. Kelly.
Second.
Second, Ms. Evancheck. Any discussion? All right, let's vote. All in favor? Mr. Bryant?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. And then 9.10, Leave Without Pay, presented by Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, and recommended by Superintendent Chambers for approval. Need a motion?
I'll move.
Motion, Dr. Kelly.
Second.
Second, Ms. Evancheck. Any discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Bryant. Motion carries 5-0. All right, discussion agenda. 10.1, deleted. We read, of course, out at the very beginning, request for school board direction regarding the 2020 sales tax program. There were no items moved. Moving on to section 11, construction program owners representatives business. Mr. Destin, you gave us an update. Is there anything tonight?
Oh, not really, Chairman. We've completed a couple of projects that had to do with continuing education.
Okay.
And then we got our certificate from Jacobs Titan saying those were done, which
That's
is
good.
always a good thing.
Yes, sir.
But
Yes, sir.
the main item here is we're going forward with more security construction, and as we discussed at the board, it's a large sum of money, and they're gonna get to it as quickly as they can.
Yes, sir, and you're referring there, I think, to item 11.2?
Yes, sir.
And that, of course, is one that is an action item. And as we know, and members of the public who might not have listened to the workshop, but might be listening tonight, This is an additional $6 million that is being moved into school safety. And that's on top of the earlier $5 million. And I pointed out, and I've said, and I'll say again, that's not new money. That's money that had to be shuffled around from other projects, but we take school safety and school security very seriously, and the superintendent and his staff have looked at those things and have made this recommendation to us, bringing us to 11.2, Program Number 6, Task Order Number 2, GMP District-Wide School Security Upgrade Project Phase 1B, to include scope modification previously approved, presented by Dr. Bill Smith, Program Director of Facilities Planning and Maintenance, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. I need a motion.
I will move that that be approved.
Thank you, Mr. Destin. Motion by Mr. Destin.
Second.
Second by Ms. Vancheck. Any further discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. All in favor? Mr. Bryant?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. All right, that takes us through Section 11. There's no business in Section 12. Mr. Attorney, Section 13, your business, sir.
No report tonight.
Thank you, sir. Superintendent, you've got some out-of-state field trips. You may have other items that you wish to discuss.
Yes, sir. So I think, on Thursday, had a lengthier brief to the school board, and we spoke about some things such as safety, ESE, the school performance plan process, as well as the apprenticeship program. So I'm not going to repeat all of that tonight, but I do want to say, another positive piece of this job, and in terms of everything that we do each and every day, the A+ celebrations is something that I definitely look forward to. This past Friday, I was blessed to go over to Laurel Hill. If you've never been to a Laurel Hill pep rally,
Go
then
Hobos.
you are missing something. And what was so amazing was watching kindergarten students interact with seniors in a pep rally, and watching how those high school students care for those little kids was something that was remarkable. And watching that staff interact with those students, it was a good feeling. And then also today, had another A+ recognition, and that was going over to the Ballet Academy. And you had every student that was in their studio today, and we had a nice conversation with the students. We talked about dreams and goals, and the staff there, once again, the way that they interact with those students is something that is very special. So those are just two events on the positive side, and sometimes don't speak about that enough. And I just really appreciated the time that we had with Laurel Hill and the Ballet Academy.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chambers. All right, so that takes us to board members' business. And Mr. Destin, if you have anything tonight, sir.
I don't think I have anything additional.
All right, yes, sir. Thank you.
I would agree with Mr. Chambers that the Ballet Academy and the STEM Academy, those are two places where you can go and see students that are really enthused. Not that all our schools aren't enthused, but they seem to go to another level, and it's always a thrill to go by and watch those kids.
Yeah, awesome. All right, thank you, sir. Dr. Kelly?
Oh, well, I'll just echo about Laurel Hill. If you think that's amazing, you ought to be on the bus with kindergartners and high schoolers. It's pretty amazing how they take care, the older students take care of the younger ones. That is a cultural deal there at the school, and it's really powerful. But I would just like to remind us that Wednesday, September 28th, is Meet You at the Pole Day. So in the mornings, most of our schools will be meeting around that flagpole, and it'll be a pretty powerful event too. So that's Wednesday, September 25th. That is also FAFSA-sponsored Dad Take Your Child to School Day. So we need to be prepared for that. And October the 2nd, we will soon be in October, can you believe that? That will be National Walk to School Day. So lots of things coming up. And just because I'm now known as the calendar lady, we have 87 days until Christmas. 87 days, and only 56 of those are instructional days. My goodness, time to start cramming. I know you're thinking about that too, Superintendent and staff. That's all I have.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly. Ms. Vancheck?
Well, Mr. Superintendent, you left out the best part of your visit to Laurel Hill. And that was that our superintendent joined right into their pep rally and did a fabulous job in a dance. And I give him kudos because
We have that on video.
we have it on video. Check it out. He did a great job. And But no, that's good. It's great to see you, out there. That's getting out there and everything. And you did a good job. I was very impressed. So, that's good. In fact, I was a little shown up. I had the honor of being the Grand Marshal up at Baker, and I thought I was doing pretty good, but that kind of upstaged me. However, I do want to thank Mr. Martello, the principal at Baker, the administration, faculty, and staff up there. Couldn't have been more honored. They really did put out what they would put out, a gold carpet for me, and did a fabulous job. Excuse me, again, another culture of kindergarten through 12, all at the Gator Growl. It's something to see and be a part of, and I loved it. And after all, in a parade that would top any parade we have anywhere in this county, I've never seen so much candy and beads. It was great. And at the end of it all, I want to congratulate Coach Brunson, 33 consecutive regular season football wins for the Baker boys Friday night. So what a fabulous time, and I'm very proud of them at Baker. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Evanchek. And colleagues, I do have an item of business here under board members' business, and I need to ask for a board member to serve on the Food Service RFP Committee. Who might be willing to volunteer for that?
Well, I got voted on the last committee for the Value Board, so I think it needs to flow to somebody else.
So you're not eligible.
I am ineligible.
Well, the last time this came up, I had the pleasure of doing it, and I hate to deny my fellow board members a thrilling job. Although I think we actually flew to Texas and sampled food, so it may not be a bad deal.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's out of order for me. So, anyone else willing to?
I will volunteer if there's nobody to volunteer.
Okay.
I was going to say the same.
I think
but let
we're ready
Mr.
to
I'm
vote.
sitting here and watching CC. What am I going to say, right?
Well, Mr. Bryant, we appreciate you volunteering and stepping up. In fact, tonight, you're already doing school board business for us, and you're out of town, and you had to call in. So we do appreciate very much your willingness to do that, and unless there's any objection, we'll just enter Mr. Bryant then into this particular.
Thank you, Mr. Bryant.
Thank you.
I think you should appoint.
All right, so need a motion.
I'll move that we appoint Mr. Bryant as our representative to that committee.
Motion by Mr. Destin, need a second?
I'll second.
Second by Dr. Kelly. Any discussion? All right, let's vote. All in favor? Mr. Bryant voted yes, too. Very good. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Okay, so that takes us through the board members' business and takes us into the final public comment. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak this evening? Okay, I don't see anyone. Colleagues, any other business, anything? Got everything covered? Superintendent, you and your staff good?
We are.
Mr. McInnes? This meeting is adjourned.